How's it going, everyone? And welcome to Animal Talk Podcast with me, your host, Ryne Ferguson. So, quite an interesting week again. You may notice or may hear that I am slightly nasally. So, it has been change of season here in the south coast of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, and my sinuses do not like change of season. There's quite a bit of pollen around. And been having a few sinus issues and a bit of a postnasal drip. So I am struggling with a bit of a blocked nose now and then. And that has gone into my chest. And I've also been coughing. So the blocked nose I can sort of deal with. But the coughing has been quite interesting. Considering it's been COVID, every time you cough, everybody looks at you like you have COVID. And it's definitely not the case with me. So that has been quite interesting. So I do apologize with the sound quality. It might not be the best, but we'll just go with it. So my house has been quite a bit of a buzz for the last week or so. It started off with new additions to the household for a few days, which I kind of touched upon in the last episode. But now I can tell you a little bit more about it. So I was called out by some concerned residents that they had found 3 little spotted eagle owlets on the floor. And it turned out that they had launched themselves out of their little hollow in a tree because there were a lot of these large ants busy biting them. So upon looking and seeing if it would be viable to put them back in the hollow, decided that wouldn't be a good plan. So brought them home. Looked after them for a few days while we managed to get somebody to put up a box. And then when the box was ready, just above the hollow, we put them back in with some diatomaceous earth to keep the ants out. And that evening, Mom and Dad came back and chicks are happy and all is well. So that was a really cool experience and a great outcome. So I'm quite excited about that. So yeah, house was a little bit of a buzz at the time. And feeding little owlets every few hours was quite challenging, and I wasn't able to get to all of my edits, but now it's all sorted and we can move along. So one of the biggest challenges being a host of this podcast was trying to accommodate everybody's time schedules with being guests on the show. And one of the other troubles is making sure that I get the time right when the people are from other countries where there's different time zones. And that has been one of the challenges. And for this next guest was one of the challenges that I managed to overcome, which I'm quite excited about. And then adding to that, during the time that I was trying to get to talk to this person, well, we had what we call load shedding, which in South Africa, all of us know about it. It's the fact that there is not enough power to run the entire country, so they switch off certain areas so that there is enough power and we're off for a few hours or so. And that's normally scheduled for certain times of the day or night. And we were not scheduled for a certain load shed, so I was quite happy to call my guest and start with the recording, and within 2 minutes of starting, boom, no power. So that was fantastic, but we're ready and we're going to do this and it's all going to work really, really well. And I'm super excited to introduce you to my next guest because this person has been around since the beginning. I started with IAATE and traveling to the States and going to the conferences. And I was so excited when I was over there, and this person really guided me and gave me the opportunity to be able to find my feet and really made it fun on the trips that we went to, and has been a very big, intricate part of my time at the conferences. So I'm so excited to share this person with you guys. Everybody, this is Robin Shewokis. How's it going, Robin? So nice to have you here.
Hey, Ryan, it's going well. It's very exciting to be talking to you.
Thanks. Yeah, very excited. I'm so glad that we finally got this going. And after all the technical errors and the power outages and the internet problems and the time schedulings and all of that, we're finally doing it.
It's interesting. If nothing else from the world situation, I think we're all going to be a little bit more creative and a little bit more tech savvy than we were when we started.
I totally agree. I've learned so much along the way that now I can do so much more than I used to be able to do. It's great. And I think I receive 10 points for saying your surname correctly. Did I say it
It
correctly?
was very nice. The only thing I have to tell you is I've been married since I saw you last. So
Oh,
now I
wow.
have an easier one. It's Sullivan. It's not as much fun to make fun of, but it is, it's easier.
It's not as exciting and just like you said, to make fun of. I will never forget the story you told me about the lady. I think it was at a parrot, a companion parrot meeting, or you're doing some sort of enrichment talk.
Oh,
And when she introduced you, you got to tell everybody about that. That was really good.
I I was speaking for a group of companion parrot owners and on enrichment and some behavior modification, and she kept saying to me she couldn't remember how to say my last name. She just couldn't remember it. And someone said, it's like she woke us up. She woke us. And so I get up there and she's introducing me in all her glory, and she says, "It is my pleasure to introduce to you Robin. She woke us up." I didn't know what to do. I just kind of looked and smiled and went on. And, that's one of those moments. And of course, my friends that were in the audience will never let me forget that. Yeah. So it's always fun.
And of course,
So Sullivan's a little easier.
oh, absolutely. That's much easier. But with her southern accent, also kind of made it, the part was just even funnier.
Oh, it's true. So
Oh man, that's fantastic, Robin. It's so nice to be chatting to you again. It's been way too long. I think it's been. I haven't seen you or physically chatted to you probably in the last 6 years, which is really scary.
it's been that long. Yeah. But we can pick up and start right where we left off. That's the nice thing.
That is the best part. I love it. A quick thing. You're a co-owner of the Leather Elves. I'd like maybe an idea of how that all started, how you got into that, and a little bit of history about Leather Elves and what Leather Elves does.
Sure. We started 25 years ago. It was my parents' company. And the name comes from, I don't know if you know the story of the elves and the shoemaker. So the little elves were able to make shoes overnight for the shoemaker, and then he could sell them. And when my parents first started the business, they could make toys overnight and get them to pet stores. And thankfully, can't get them done overnight any longer. But what we started out doing was just basic parrot toys made out of leather and wood and fruit and nuts. And one of the big focuses for me was safety. And I picked it up with my dad when my mom passed away. It was just going to be something that I helped him out with to keep him busy.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, or fortunately, actually, it took over my life. And I started working with big collections of parrots. I started consulting with zoos, and it kind of grew from there. And I was working a lot with the American Association of Zookeepers. I was an advisor to their behavioral husbandry and enrichment committee. And we started talking about commercially created enrichment for other species,
Mhm.
because we all know that primates are spoiled,
Oh yeah.
our non-primates are spoiled. And so we started working on some toys for or devices for primates, and we did them from gorilla size down to marmots and or marmosets. And we also did a project. My first presentation at a zookeepers conference was on commercially designed bat enrichment. We worked with the Luby Foundation down in Florida. So it's been a journey, and I have learned from some of the most amazing people in the industry. And we work with companion parrot owners. We work with zoos. I'll go in and create a enrichment program for zoos, maybe help them streamline what they've got already, and just kind of look at things from a sensory perspective.
Right. That is awesome. Getting to meet so many different people and going all over the place and just throwing your knowledge out there and helping everybody. It's amazing. And I've been at some of your talks at IAATE and the enrichment workshops that you've done. And I've always gone out of those enrichment workshops with so many ideas and so many things I want to try and do and just get involved with. So it's all great and it's just awesome.
Well, that's one of the fun things too, is sharing that information. I feel like I've been very lucky to be able to go from one facility to another. Some people are only at their facility. or only their, if they're pet owners, they just have the experience with their pet and they don't have a network to draw from.
Right.
And sometimes the information that's on the internet is it can be sketchy in some cases. And so to be able to be at one facility, see what they're doing, take that information, help them out, and then go to another facility and say, hey, here's what they were doing with their capybara. Here's what they were doing with their, birds of prey. And it's just kind of nice to be able to spread that information because I'm lucky enough to go from place to place.
Right. And it's so important to just communicate with each other, and everybody's got so much different experiences and different knowledge, and to just sort of hone in on that and get some of that information just works so well. That's why there's nothing better than going to a conference or going to another zoo just for a visit, just getting to hear things and see things. Yeah, you can't do any better than that.
Well, and the nice thing too is seeing different perspectives. I remember one of the first talks I ever did was for a facility that had a big wolf pack, and they also had an education department that had small parrots and small mammals and some reptiles, and everybody came together for the talk that I was doing. And I remember putting a question out, and the staff that worked with the wolves, they had instantly had an answer to the question. And I could see the looks on the faces of the education department what was suggested wasn't something that they would normally do. And then other topics came up, and it was vice versa. The education department had some great ideas that the wolf pack staff would never have thought of. And it's just a matter of sharing, that you may work with a different species in your facility than somebody else, but something you're doing may be able to be adapted, or it may be an idea that just wasn't in your scope at that point in time. But if somebody shares those ideas, it kind of crosses over different species, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love it when that happens. It's so cool because then you just have that like, oh wow, that really does work, and it's going to work for this one as well. I like that. I love it.
Yeah, it's that aha moment.
That aha moment. Yep, light bulb moment. And Robin, there's also I'm probably going to get it wrong, but it's the National Parrot Rescue that you sit on as a board member.
It's NPRPF, and it's National Parrot Rescue and Preservation Foundation.
There we go.
They are an organization based in Houston, Texas. So we're kind of hoping they get through the 2 hurricanes that are coming through this morning. It started out as a small group of parrot owners, and they've kind of grown. They do a wonderful event every January with speakers from all over the world. They've worked with people from the Puerto Rican Parrot Project. They have veterinarians come in. Barb Heidenreich has spoken for them. It's really a lot of fun, and there's a lot of education. And they just asked me if I would be on their board of directors, and I was happy to work with them.
That is so cool. Yeah, I think you wear a lot of hats, Robin. A lot.
I do. It's fun though. It's, I was formerly on the board of International Avian Trainers and Educators, and that's where we met.
Right.
And that I was on their board for 10 years, and it was such an incredible experience to be able to meet bird trainers and people who work in the industry from all different levels, and to be able to every year go to their conference. And I know things are a little different. This year things are going virtual for a lot of conferences, but some of the information that you pick up from those organizations is just fantastic.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm actually quite excited for the new conference that's sort of going virtual this year, because I haven't been able to attend it for the last 5 years or so. And right. I'm just super stoked to possibly be able to be a part of that now. Even though I'm sitting here on the African continent, I'm still going to be a part of it. It won't be the same, because obviously being in the same room with everyone and getting to have that chill time and chat about absolutely everything, as we know, especially between you and I, where we've gone and visited zoos, going out with IAATE for all the zoo visits and having the best time ever. But of course, there's so many different ways we can communicate and get our interests out with each other and get to know everybody.
Right. I think, honestly, I was thinking about it this morning that one of our first long conversations was on a bus, in Tampa, I
Yep.
think. We were going out for an evening out at the conference, and I remember, talking to you and how enthused you were about all that you were learning.
Yeah.
And that was just, for me as a board member, that was just so exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, I was overwhelmed, but also just so excited to hear and know how everybody did everything. Yeah, I remember those days so well. And every time I meet people, and they always say to me, I've always wanted to go and never got the opportunity. I just tell them, you've got to just do it at
Yeah.
least once. I mean, I got so excited I did it 4 times, but I
We were glad to have you.
oh, thanks. I even sat in some of your board meetings, which was really cool and such an honor.
It's yeah, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, and it was kind of nice that you were able to attend those.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
thoroughly enjoyed them. I really did have a good time. Before we move on, Robin, I forgot to mention, ask you to mention, whereabout is the Level L's based?
So we are based in New Hampshire in the United States. We were near Boston, and then we decided back in December that we would move further north, which for us is very cold, and I don't know why. Um, we found a great old farmhouse and with a workshop that we could use, and it's quieter. Honestly, with everything that's going on with the pandemic, it's been a great place to be.
Yeah,
Um, and it's got its challenges, but that's where we're located. And it's a little more difficult for me to travel from here. It's not where we lived before and where we worked before. We were about 20 minutes from a major airport.
mhm.
Here we're about 2 hours from a major airport.
Wow.
Yeah, so some of the, even pre-COVID, there was not as much travel happening.
Right. Well, let's hope that things improve a little bit along the way. And yeah, I'm sure if you get the opportunity, you will still travel those 2 hours to the airport to get yourself on a plane to go to where you need to go. Because
Well, when I need to get to South Africa, I'm going to have to get to that airport.
totally, I agree. Definitely. Um, you were also the president of IAATE, which was really exciting. And unfortunately, I got to miss it. And that really
I
was
know
horrible.
you didn't show up for any of my tenure as president, which is it was a little disappointing, I got to say. We being president of that organization was it's been a highlight of my career. The board of directors is such an incredible group of people. I have made friends that I will have for the rest of my life on that board of directors. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes that people don't know how hard that board works. It's emails and calls and face-to-face meetings that are whole days and into the evening long, and they're working on behalf of the membership,
Right.
and it was a fantastic experience for me.
Yeah.
My very best friend in the world is their current president, so it's Dave Miller. If any of you ever get to talk to Dave about bird training, you will be very, very lucky. Dave is one of the premier bird trainers that I know. He does incredible job with exhibit training, which he brought that to the forefront. He was on the board with me, and a couple of the things that we really pushed for was the fact that there is a lot of really cool training that can be done with exhibit birds, and a lot of different ways to highlight natural behaviors, to highlight the different things that people don't always see when they are walking through exhibits. And it's really important, and it's something that people should consider if they are not working in a show setting.
Yeah. Dave blows me away sometimes because I can't believe the things that he actually manages to do on exhibit. I mean, there is barely any sort of, conditioning that he does where you're sort of trying to get the bird used to you and sitting with it all the time. It's literally just building that trust every single day and making sure that You're using everything in your toolbox. You've got whatever positive reinforcement you can possibly find. He knows exactly how to get that out and get that right. And his whole flamingo demonstration, I was blown away.
It's incredible, and he's working with bee eaters now, and he's got them hovering and circling and stationing, and it is about that relationship, and that's he puts into play the things that all of us have been working on for so very long.
Right.
And for me, from my perspective and my passion, you build some of that relationship with enrichment.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I agree. It's one of those things where you've got to think outside the box, and it's not just the obvious things that are right in front of you. It's things that sometimes you may not have even thought of that just make it work. That a bird just really, or an animal just really likes, and gets it
I think
going.
I think sometimes we take it for granted. When you're working in the field, when you're working with a collection of animals, whether it's birds or mammals or reptiles, you take some of their majesty, if you will, for granted.
Right.
And you can show that to the people that come to visit your facilities, or you can show that if you're a pet owner, you can show your friends that don't have the same kind of pet some of those behaviors, and you can use enrichment to elicit those behaviors. You can use training to elicit those behaviors, and the closer you stick to natural, the easier it's going to be.
Right.
If you're asking a bird on a bicycle is not the way to go.
No.
It's not something that bird they'll be able to do it, and you can train them to do that, but that's not necessarily what you want to show people. It's so much easier for a bird to show you wings up, or for a bird to show you a flight, and to demonstrate that. And isn't that kind of the message that we want people to take away anyway?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We want them to experience those animals in their most natural form, because that's what we want them to see and what we want them to fall in love with. We want them to fall in love with the fact that they are animals in the wild that we need to protect, or animals that we need to be passionate about. And I guess that's the only way to do it, is to make sure that they see how amazing those natural behaviors are and how amazing those animals respond to doing natural behaviors. It's just, I'm always amazed at the things that we can accomplish when using training techniques to get those behaviors.
And when you get people excited about a natural behavior, then that translates into excitement about conservation. By showing someone, again, you can show the bird on the bicycle, and it gets a laugh, and you get the oohs and the ahs, and the bird on the skateboard and that kind
Right.
of stuff. And it's definitely fun. But if you show someone, if anybody has not seen a macaw in flight, it's one of the most magnificent things ever.
Oh yeah.
From a personal standpoint, I remember the first time I had a golden eagle on my glove. I was standing in front of a group of high school children doing a little outreach, and I remember starting to cry. The golden that I was working with started to vocalize, and first I was terrified, and then I realized, okay, no, it's not a dangerous situation.
Right.
But it was a connection, and my mentor in that leaned over to me. She was there with me, and she leaned over and she said, "She's singing to you."
Right.
And it was just this immediate connection, and just not to sound kind of silly, but there's a majesty and kind of a spiritual connection that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about that natural being. It's
Yeah.
about wanting to now it's I've had that experience, or I've seen that if I go to a show, I've seen different birds being flown, or I've seen animals being used for demonstration purposes, and now I want to save them. Now I want to, how can I impact the life of those animals in the wild?
That is exactly what our goal is when it comes to trying to get everybody's buy-in on conservation, and I love it. It gives me goosebumps sometimes just talking about it, and just knowing those connections that you make and the connections that people make. I know, changing just one person's mind in a show and having that goosebump moment where they have that aha moment that they're going to make a change really
Right.
makes a difference.
And if you can get a child excited about nature, excited about animals, they're the stewards that are going to go forward and save this planet. It's,
Absolutely.
I used to do an event with the Nature Conservancy. We used to do an event called Bowl the Planet. And they would have a bowl-a-thon, bowling, and get pledges. And it was to go towards saving the rainforest and saving the coral reef.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the kids asking me if could they go camping on the land that they saved? Because the program was you buy an acre.
Right.
And it was, could they go camping? And I said, well, not right now, but if you save it, it'll be there in the future. And maybe you can go there sometime and visit.
Oh, that's such a great concept. I love it. I love that concept. That's awesome. Talking about going out places and preserving places, Robin, there's a bird that cracks me up. And I think it's been in every single conference that I've been to where we've seen some videos that just crack me up. And this is exactly where we're going with this conservation thing and how important it is to conserve. But looking through your social media, one popped up and I was like, we got to talk about this. And that's the Kakapo.
Yeah, that was a once in a lifetime experience. Barbara Heidenreich and I we were in New Zealand. Barbara arranged an appointment with the conservation group there, and we went, and they were wonderfully receptive. And we talked to them, and we said, how can we help you? Both of us were speaking all over, and we said, is there any way we can get your word out? And what they were doing for Kakapo conservation. And we said we would pass the message along and see what we could get done. And so we put them in our presentations, and Barb she was able to work with Sirocco and do a lot of training, hands-on training. But the gentleman that we were speaking with turned and said, well, we want to reinforce your behavior. And I was like, wait, what? And he said, would you like to see some Kakapo chicks? Excuse me? Of course I would. And we were like, well, how far away is it? And it was, I want to say it was 6 or 8 hours away. And
wow.
we had to be in Brisbane the next day, I believe. And so we said, or the day after. And so we said, I don't know. And he said, well, you could fly. And he looked it up, and it was a ridiculous amount of money. And, as much as I want to do these things, sometimes you got to be realistic and pay the bills. So we kind of left, and we were kind of dejected, and we were walking down the street. And I remember I called it our amazing race moment. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with that show where people used to race around the world and try to get things done. And so I opened the door to this travel agency, and I said, okay, we need to get to this city, and we need to get there by this time. And then we need a hotel, and then we need to get to Invercargill. We need to get to Brisbane. So the woman starts typing on her computer, and she looks up and she says, I can do that for $600.
Oh,
$600? That's next to nothing for this experience. So we were like, okay, book it. So we got to the airport, and there was a storm, and there was a delay. And then we got to Christchurch, and there was a mechanical on the plane. And it seemed like we would never get there. And then we got to the location where they had them on the mainland, and it was this little tiny facility. And we went in, and we had to put on TVEC suits, and we went in, and there were 9 Kakapo chicks in this enclosure, and they were just cruising around. They looked like a bunch of big green chickens. Was one of the it changed my life. I mean, it was one of those, okay, this is why we have that conservation message. This is why we do what we do. This is why we try to get people excited about animals. And so we were kind of messing down, looking at them, and they were eating, they were going through browse, they were doing all these really cool natural behaviors, and they were in human care at the time. And one of the gentlemen said, do you want to see how much they weigh? And this was towards the end of us being there. And I thought, I see how much they weigh. You're going to put them on a scale. And, I'm going to be polite because you've just let me see 9 Kakapo chicks. So we're like, sure. And he reaches down, scoops up this Kakapo chick, and puts it in my arms.
Wow.
And if anybody's been on my social media, you can't really tell on my face, but my thought process was, please don't let me drop this and break it. Um, they are truly like a big green chicken. And it was, to be able to hold a Kakapo chick was just, it was amazing. It was, and it made me want to be a better citizen of this planet, if you will. It made me, how can I help? How can I get that information out there? And
Yeah.
I think, if you get to have one of those moments, or if you have the opportunity to go to some place, like that, or some place where they're working on an trying to save an endangered species, by all means do it, because it's well worth it.
Yeah. What an amazing experience. That must have been life-changing. Wow.
It was. It really was.
So cool. I love that. I love cockapos. They have the sweetest faces and they're the most strangest looking birds, but man, there's something about them that they just really are
Well, and
amazing.
they're so inefficient in their breeding,
Yeah.
that you kind of go, I don't know. But we have encroached on so much of their space. And it's because of us that
Right.
they're, they have to be on a predator-free island. We introduce the predators that reduce their numbers. So yeah, it's, they may be inefficient, but they were doing okay until we kind of stepped in
We
and
came in.
started.
Yeah. If anybody does not know what a kakapo is, Google it. You will be surprised. They are very interesting looking parrots.
They're yeah, they don't look, and they have a facial disc that looks like an owl.
Right.
They're ground dwellers. They'll climb up trees and stuff like that, but they're not flighted. They're nocturnal. I mean, there's everything about them is just kind of different, but they're
Right.
still parrot species.
So cool. I love them. They're really amazing. Robin, you're the enrichment guru. I think I've always gone to you for enrichment and the enrichment committee. And so I thought it might be a really cool idea to maybe give some enrichment guidelines for everyone. We try and do enrichment as best we can, but what guidelines should we sort of be following as we do those enrichments?
So whenever I try to create an enrichment program, I'm a list person, so I need to kind of get things written out in categories and things like that. And I've always tried to approach it from a sensory perspective. So the first and foremost thing you have to do is your research. And everybody goes, and if you get a new animal in your area, you get a new animal that you're assigned to that you need to create enrichment for, or you get a new pet that you haven't had before, you really need to do some research. So you need to find out what this animal does in the wild. What's it all about in nature? Is it, where does it live? Geographically, where is it from? What type of habitat does it live in? Does it live in a desert region? Does it live in a forested region? Does it live near a water source all the time? What's the water source like? Do they interact in the water? All those kind of questions. And you can set those questions up for yourself and maybe make a list, like, where does it live? How does it feed? I mean, that's another thing. Is it a hunter? Is it is it a gatherer? What does it eat? So in human care, we can't always create the exact diet that our animals would eat in the wild, but we want to come close, and we want to come close to how they get that diet. So once you do your research and you've got a really good idea what the natural history is of this animal, then you can go ahead and start creating enrichment. And I think sometimes we get stuck on presenting an item, that I'm going to present this and I want to see them, interact with it. That's my goal. But what I suggest is you take it and look at it from, can you create something that addresses olfactory sensation? And it may be different. When I first started working with parrots, people told me, oh, you're wasting your time with olfactory for parrots. And when I was in New Zealand, we were at the Auckland Zoo. We were doing a presentation there, And we got to go in with kakas, they're a brown parrot. And we went in with them. And I had always been a big advocate for olfactory with parrots. And people, again, nope, you're wasting your time. Well, this kaka came over and put its nares on my head,
Ooh.
like right on my hair. You could hear it inhale, and then it turned and preened. So this was my aha moment and my see, I told you moment,
Right.
that it was worth doing. So my feeling is if you can address the different senses, so olfactory, visual, auditory, dietary, and by dietary, it's not increase the daily diet. It's think of different ways to present the diet. So if you work at a facility, I guarantee you your vet or your nutritional staff is going to be all over you if you try to keep adding stuff to the diet.
Right.
What you want to do is just figure out a different way to offer it.
Yeah.
And with visual, so a lot of zoos and facilities here in the US are set up so that there's visual stimulation happening all the time. If you think about it, when you go visit a zoo, the predators are quite often across from the prey animals across the walkway.
Right.
So, the big cats have a view of the hoofstock, vice versa, which leads to the question, isn't that just mean because the hoofstock, lives in a state of fear?
Right.
Well, that's not the case. It's just they are a prey species. That's what's natural for them. And a little bit of stress is enriching. So if you take all those senses and then you try to create your program from there, I think you will be most successful. And it goes back to what we were talking about with training, that you're asking for natural behaviors.
Yeah.
So, if you've got an animal that forages for food on the ground, you want to make sure that that's where you're offering your foraging activities. I was consulting at a zoo and they had a mixed species aviary and they got a new bird in, and the keeper came to me and said, well, the bird's not eating. He's not, I put it all out on the tray and I cut it up in this size pieces and he's not eating. And we went in and I looked, and the bird was an arboreal forager and he had the tray down on the ground. It's a simple mistake.
Right.
But if that keeper had done their research, they would know, okay, this bird, he eventually would have eaten on the ground.
Yeah.
But it's not where he's comfortable. It's not, especially a new animal in exhibit, you're asking them to do something that's completely out of their comfort zone, if you will, something that they don't normally do on top of being in a new location. And the other thing about enrichment, aside from trying to keep it natural and relate it back to natural behaviors, you want to make sure that you give it time. So if you've got the luxury of being able to put something in and stick with it for a little while, and on your rotation you're able to stay there for a bit, I highly suggest it. When you offer anything new, you should always observe or have someone there to observe. So if it gets dangerous,
right.
It can be pulled, but you also need to give it some time. I remember going to a facility that had a swim with dolphins program. And when they were they were doing a little lecture beforehand about when you got in the water with the dolphins and what have you. And the way they described it will always stick with me. They said that it was like if you went out to work and you came home and there was a stranger sitting in your living room that had moved all your furniture around.
Oh my word.
Right? So that's
freak out.
Right? You'd lose your mind. And so, but we do it to our animals all the time. Right? We put enrichment out in an enclosure when they're off in holding.
Right.
You've been shifted off into holding. You put which is great because they can come out and discover it, but you've got to give them a little time to adjust. So it's not, okay, maybe that stranger is not sitting in your living room, but all your furniture has been moved.
Right.
Well, you've got to kind of figure out why, and then what's the purpose, and then I still want to sit on that couch and have my bowl of popcorn and watch TV, so I'm going to sit on it.
Right.
But you've got to give them a chance to acclimate to it.
Absolutely. I love
So
that.
those are kind of my go-to guidelines when I'm trying to create a program. The other thing is try not to get stuck with one type or one particular offering or opportunity, because we do that. So as keepers and trainers, if you get a response, like I call it the fireworks response. If you get that big fireworks response, it's kind of exciting for you. It's enriching for you.
Yeah.
So when you get that response, you do it again. I'm gonna give them that again. I'm gonna give them that enrichment opportunity again. And if you keep giving it, the novelty will wear off and it will not be the favorite enrichment anymore. And you'll stop getting that fireworks response. So that try to rotate things and not do the duplication. So the way I manage that as a list person is I make a list of these are all the things, I want to do for visual enrichment. These are all the things I want to do for dietary enrichment. And then you've got all your options and you decide which days you're going to offer which type of enrichment. And, Monday's dietary, Tuesday's visual, Wednesday's olfactory. And then you have a list. I've got these options. Okay, I already used this month. I'm going to cross it off. I already used this. I'm not going to use it again until the next kind of rotation. So that way you're not doing the same thing over and over again.
Right.
Because enrichment is supposed to be different. It differs from the norm.
Yeah. New and exciting, but not too overwhelming.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's so helpful, Robin. That has probably put a lot of questions in people's minds, but also a lot of understanding of where they can go and how they can get that moving forward in the enrichment that they have to do or feel like they need to get done. So that's great. And thanks so much for that, Robin. Just being cognizant of time, and you and I could talk for days. I'm quite excited because I got some questions about enrichment from some of the listeners. So if you don't mind, if we could just go through those and then answer them quite quickly if we could.
This is the stump the guest part.
Yeah, this is the hopefully it is not like that. You're all good, Robin. You're all good. You're amazing at this, so I'm sure you'll do just great.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So the first question is from Nikki, and she wants to know the importance of enrichment for raptors, birds of prey, and how often to give it to them.
Okay, so I am a firm believer that all animals need enrichment. And for raptors in particular, their exercise is critical because you need to keep up. If you've got a bird in a show setting, clearly you want them to be in good condition. And by offering enrichment, you can sometimes encourage a little bit more exercise than you might see with a bird that's in a mew until it's time to go on show. So if you're offering that enrichment, you might get them moving around a little bit more. So it'll encourage some exercise. And it also keeps them, when you think about the number of quick moment by moment choices and decisions that a raptor or a bird or any kind of bird of prey needs to make in the wild, some of those choices and those decisions are made for them when we have them in human care. So you've got to keep them both mentally and physically stimulated if you're going to use, if you want to show people how amazing they are. Yeah. If you want them to participate in your show, then you've got to keep them, in tip-top shape. And I think exercises in enrichment is so very important for raptors. And as far as how often you should do it, I would suggest daily. Right. So raptors are a bit more challenging because a lot of enrichment is food-based. And so with raptors, you need to come up with enrichment that is not food-based because they're not, you're not going to be able to enrich them every day if it's a food item. There are dietary restrictions that happen. And so with raptors, a lot of it is visual. A lot of it is tactile, things like leaf bathing, putting, you can hang wet vegetation browse on the side and they'll leaf bathe. Pools of water. If you have a water element in your enclosure, it's fantastic. We created a little waterfall for bald eagles at one point, simple to make, just a recirculator on a boulder that happened to be in the enclosure anyway. We ran the water over it into a pool, put a stump beside it. It became the coveted spot for our bald eagles.
That is cool.
So yeah, important for raptors, very important.
Nice. The second question is from Jean. And the question is it enough enrichment for a trainer to just sit and interact with the bird?
So that is, you could probably check that off as one form of enrichment. It's engaging with the bird. But that's more of a building trust and building that relationship.
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily call it enrichment.
Right. That's a good one. Yeah. And I think just interacting with the birds is a change in their environment, and it's something that they do get to, with the trust, enjoy. But I think there's so many other elements to enrichment that need to be covered, that it is important to make sure that we try and fit other enrichment in at the same time.
Right. I think you can probably, if you had categories and social was one of them, you could check it off there.
Right. Yeah, that would be cool.
Trying to enrich them socially, that would maybe meet the check mark, but not all the time.
Right. And then the last one, the third one, is from Jess. And it is, if you're working with a working bird of prey in a bird show, is that enough, just working with that bird, training it? Is that enough enrichment?
Again, I don't think so, because I don't think you're checking off all the boxes. I don't think you are enriching all aspects of the bird's life.
Right.
I think it's fantastic for birds that are in shows. I think animals prefer to work. They seem to enjoy, for lack of a better term, I don't want to anthropomorphize them, but they do better when they've got tasks to complete. And so, flying A to B's and flying circuits and, standing for demos, those are all kind of like their job. And then for enrichment, it's like I said, it's that feet up on the table, glass of wine in hand at the end of the day.
Right.
So I think it's important that you provide additional enrichment to just working the show.
Yeah, I think that's key. I think it's so important. And we've touched on it quite a bit throughout the podcast about that. So yeah, I like it. And I'm so excited that we've had this chat, Robin. Robin, how can... You'll have to say that again, because we have wonderful Wi-Fi in Africa and it seems to cut everybody off when I talk.
I made it through the question portion.
You did. You get 10 points.
Good deal.
Well done. Robin, is there any way that people can contact you or see any of the things that you do? Maybe, view some stuff that Leather Elves does, anything like that. If you could just give us a quick idea of how people can, contact you on that.
Sure. We have a Facebook page. It's the Leather Elves, ELVES. And most of what's on there is parrot enrichment. We've got a lot of companion parrot owners that follow us. We also have the Leather Elves has an Instagram account. If anybody has questions or they want to get in touch or they need help with creating a program, we are available. We do consult with facilities, and it's a little more difficult in this virtual world. But if anybody wants to email me, they can email me at birdelves, ELVES, @AOL.com. And I'm happy to answer questions. It's nice to kind of be able to bounce ideas around with people. And sometimes it's just a different set of eyes. And I have big air quotes on the eyes right now, but it's a different set of eyes looking at your situation and helping come up with a strategy for how to really enrich the animals in your care.
Right. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Robin. I really appreciate it. And it has been so great talking to you.
Thank you.
Like I said, you and I could talk for hours or days on a lot of these topics. So it has been quite a challenge to bring it down into the time that we had, but it's been fantastic talking to you. Thank you so much for being on the show with me.
Thank you, and take care, and hopefully we'll run into each other soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Robin. Now, if there's anyone that has any questions for me or any of my guests, please pop me an email. You can send an email to animal.talk201@gmail.com. Look forward to hearing from you guys and maybe some suggestions, any comments or questions. And maybe one of your questions might pop up in one of the podcast episodes. Thanks for listening, everyone. And remember, animals are our passion. Bye-bye. I muted my mic quite a few times to make sure that I didn't cough or splatter during your talking.
Well, I was gonna, there were a couple times I was gonna cough, and I'm like, I could mute myself, but if you ask me a question and I fumble, then I'm not gonna be there.
Oh my word. The joys.